Today we are going to be solving equations by factoring. We're going to start off with a definition, so we're going to be looking at the zero product property. So this property states for all numbers a and b, if a times b equals 0, then either a equals 0, b equals 0, or a and b equals 0. So let's look at an example. If we have 8t times the quantity 1 minus 2t, we see that there are two things being multiplied and their product is 0. This means we can use our zero product property and we can say that either 8t equals 0 or it's in our parentheses 1 minus 2t equals 0, or they both might equal 0. So now we are going to solve for t, and with the first one we divide by 8, t is going to equal 0. For the second one, we have 1 minus 2t equals 0. So we're going to subtract 2t. We get 1 equals positive 2t. And then we divide by 2, and we get 1/2 equals t. So our answers would be t equals 0 and t equals 1/2. Let's try another example. We have 3 times the quantity x plus 7 equals 0. So now using the zero product property, we know that either a can equal 0, b can equal 0, or they both can equal 0. Well, if we look, here our first number is 3. 3 can never equal 0, so we know that that's not true, which means x plus 7 must equal 0, because one of them has to equal 0. So then we will solve for x by subtracting 7, and we will find that x equals -7 to make this statement true. Okay, let's do another example. We have 2a plus 4 in our first set of parentheses, and then a plus 7 in our second, and that equals 0. So once again, we know that either this first part has to equal 0, or the second has to equal 0. So we're going to set them both equal to 0. And then we're going to solve to find our values for a that make this equation true. So on the first one, we're going to subtract 4 and then divide by 2. So a can equal -2. In our second one, we subtract 7 and find that a can equal -7. So if a equals -2 or a equals -7, that would make our original equation true. So how does this all relate to factoring? Because that's what we've been doing this entire chapter. So now we're going to start off with a polynomial. We have m squared plus 144 equals 24m. So to solve this, to find out what values of m make this equation true, we are going to factor the equation and then solve for m. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set our equation equal to 0. So in order to do that, we need to move this 24m to the other side. So we're going to have m squared minus 24m plus 144. And then we make our t, and we're going to factor. So we're going to have an m and an m. And then our factors of 144, we have 1 times 144. Okay, and we need something that when we cross multiply we get -24. So we also know that 12 times 12 equals 144, so let's give that one a shot. Okay, then we cross multiply. 12 times m is 12m, plus m times 12 is 12m again, and that equals positive 24m. So we see we want a negative 24m, we ended up with a positive 24m. That means we just need to change our signs. So we're going to make both of these a -12. Now, remember, when we factor, we go across So we ended up with m minus 12 times m minus 12, and that's going to equal 0, because if you remember back up here, we subtracted 24m, so this equals 0, so we just factored, so this is equal to that. Now we can apply our zero product property, and we know that either this first parentheses has to be equal to 0, or the second has to be equal to 0, or they can both be equal to 0. So let's set them both equal to 0. So we have m minus 12 equals 0, and m minus 12 equals 0. So we have m equals 12, and m equals 12. So the only possible value for m that can make this equation equal is if m equals 12. Now, one way that we can check to see if we found the right answer is to plug 12 back into our original equation. Alright, so we got a fresh page here. So m equals 12. Let's plug that in. We have 12 squared plus 144 equals 24 times 12. Alright, so 12 times 12 is 144 plus 144, and that equals 24 times 12 is 288. Now let's add 144 plus 144, and that equals 288, and 288 definitely equals 288, so that checks, and we know that our m equals 12 is in fact the correct answer. Let's do another example. So we have 5b cubed plus 34b squared equals 7b. First thing we're always going to do is we're going to set this equal to 0, which means for this example we need to subtract 7b. So we'll end up with 5b cubed plus 34b squared minus 7b, and that equals 0. Now, when we factor and we make our chart here, usually we have something squared up here. So then we can have our variable here and our variable here. So if we look at this polynomial right here, we can see that they all have a b in common. So b would be the greatest common factor, so we're going to factor that out to make our lives of factoring a little bit easier. So when we pull out a b, we are going to be left with 5b squared plus 34b minus 7, and that still all equals 0. Alright, so now let's do our factoring. And we are going to have our b's in here, and we see that our coefficient is 5. 5 is a prime number, so we know that one of the b's is going to be a 5b and the other is going to be a 1b. Then we look at our last one, 7. That is also a prime number, so we know we're going to have 1 and a 7, and one of them is going to be negative because we have a negative 7 out here, which means one of them needs to be negative while the other needs to be positive. So we will pick the 1 to put up here and the 7 down here. Now, how do you decide which number to make negative and which one to have positive? That you're going to look at the middle term here. Since the middle term is positive, that means our biggest number needs to be positive. So then we have a big positive number plus a smaller negative number, which is going to give us a positive number overall. That means we make our 1 a negative. Now we cross multiply. 5b times 7 is 35b plus 1b times a negative 1 is negative b, and that equals our 34b, which is exactly what we were looking for here, so we know this works. So now let's factor these, put them into our parentheses. We have 5b minus 1 times b plus 7, and that all equals 0 because up here, right? And if we notice, we remember, we factored out this b, so to keep this equation equal to our original, we need to have our b out front. So now we have 3 factors here, which it's going to be the same just like 2. One of these 3 has to equal 0 since we're multiplying them all. So b can equal 0, 5b minus 1 can equal 0, and b plus 7 can equal 0. So this answer is already done and ready for us. And if we look at the 5b minus 1, first we're going to add 1. So we have 5b equals 1, where b equals 1/5. And then for this one, we subtract 7 and get b equals -7. So since we have 3 different things here being multiplied together, all of them multiplying together to equal 0, we are going to have 3 answers for our b. And another thing that you notice, if you look back up to the original, it's cubed. There's a 3. 3 is the highest exponent. And if you notice, we have 1, 2, 3 answers. So to recap on what we did today, first thing we do is we set our equation equal to 0. Okay? Then we factored. The next thing we do is set each of our parentheses equal to 0, and then solve for the variable. So sometimes that's x, sometimes it's a, it just always changes. And our last thing is we're going to check it to make sure we have the right answer.